Have you ever walked away from a conversation with a strange feeling? A sense that something important shifted, but you can't quite put your finger on what it was. You replay the discussion in your head, searching for the exact moment things turned. The other person wasn't loud. They didn't interrupt you or raise their voice. In fact, they might have been perfectly polite, even agreeable. But as you walked away, a quiet realization dawned on you. They were the one in control the entire time. You feel like you were a passenger in a car, and they were, ever so subtly, steering. This experience is far more common than you might think. It happens in boardrooms, during coffee with a friend, in a simple chat with a family member. You leave the interaction feeling like you've been gently guided towards a conclusion that wasn't originally yours. It's a disorienting sensation, like watching a magic trick where you know you've been deceived, but the mechanics of the illusion remain completely hidden. You were part of the conversation, you spoke your mind, and yet, the final outcome, the mood, and the direction all seem to have been orchestrated by the other person. This subtle form of influence is not an accident. It's a skill. It's the art of conversational navigation, practiced by people who understand that real power isn't about being the loudest person in the room. It's about understanding the invisible currents of human interaction. They didn't need to dominate the conversation because they were directing it from beneath the surface. They didn't need to argue their points forcefully because they were shaping the very framework in which those points were discussed. They were playing a different game, one that most people don't even know exists. How can someone control a conversation without any of the obvious signs of control? How can influence be so powerful yet so completely invisible? The answer lies not in what is said, but in how it is said, when it is said, and sometimes what isn't said at all. It's a dance of timing, pacing, and emotional regulation. This isn't about manipulation in the way we typically think of it. It is a deep, fundamental understanding of human psychology, and it's a skill that can be decoded, understood, and even learned. When we think of someone controlling a conversation, our minds often conjure a very specific image. We picture a domineering personality, someone who talks over others, insists on having the last word, uses a booming voice to command attention. We imagine a debater who relentlessly pushes their agenda, a boss who shuts down opposing views, a friend who turns every discussion into a monologue. This is the Hollywood version of control. It's loud, it's obvious, it's centered on brute force. It's about winning by being the most aggressive player. But this popular image is a profound misunderstanding of what real influence looks like. While aggressive tactics can certainly shut down a conversation, they rarely ever truly control it. Forceful communication often creates resistance, resentment, a complete breakdown of genuine dialogue. The other participants may fall silent, but they are not convinced. They are simply waiting for the ordeal to be over. This kind of control is an illusion, a temporary victory that often leads to a long-term loss of connection, trust, and respect. It's a clumsy and inefficient way to guide an interaction. The truly skilled communicators, the ones who quietly shape outcomes, understand this. They know that real control is not about force, it's about finesse. It's not about dominating the conversation, it's about navigating it. They don't need to be the loudest voice, because they know how to make their quiet words weigh the most. They operate on a different plane, using psychological principles that are far more subtle and far more effective than simply talking more or talking louder. Their influence is almost invisible, woven into the very fabric of the conversation itself. Because real control in any conversation is not loud, it is silent, it is invisible. It's found in the pauses between words, in the careful framing of a question, and in the deliberate management of one's own emotional energy. These masters of communication don't try to win arguments, they shape perspectives. They don't force their opinions on others. They create an environment where others arrive at those conclusions seemingly on their own. This is the paradox of conversational control. The less you appear to be doing, the more influence you often have. In this essay, we are going to pull back the curtain on these hidden dynamics. We will break down the psychology behind quiet conversational control, exploring the subtle patterns and behaviors that allow certain individuals to influence discussions without appearing forceful. This is not about teaching you to become a manipulator or to win every argument through clever tricks. Instead, this is about fostering awareness. It's about giving you the tools to see the invisible architecture of a conversation, to understand the subtle power plays that are always in motion, whether you notice them or not. We will explore why the person who controls the pace of a conversation often controls its outcome. You'll learn how silence can be a more powerful tool than speaking, creating moments of reflection and pressure that can shift an entire discussion. We will dive into the psychology of conversational framing, revealing how the choice of a few specific words can guide another person's thinking without their conscious realization. We will unpack the mechanics of emotional control and why a calm, steady presence can create an aura of authority that requires no effort at all. Most people unknowingly give away control in their daily interactions. They react impulsively. They speak too quickly. They fail to notice the subtle cues that signal a shift in power. By understanding the psychology behind these moments, you can begin to make more conscious choices. You will learn to recognize when a conversation is being subtly steered, allowing you to decide whether you want to follow that path or gently guide it in a different direction. This knowledge empowers you to communicate more clearly, confidently, and with greater intention. Welcome to a deep dive into the human code of communication. Here, we decode the patterns of human behavior and the psychological underpinnings that shape how we think, act, and interact with one another. The goal is simple: to move from being a passive participant in your conversations to an aware and intentional navigator. Once you see these patterns, you cannot unsee them. You will start to notice the hidden dynamics in every meeting, negotiation, and casual chat. And with that awareness, you gain the ability to remain in control of your own interactions without ever needing to be aggressive. Table of Contents, Part 2, Act 1, The Hidden Mechanics. 1. The Power of the Pace Setter. 2. Conversational Framing, Building the Invisible Walls. 3. The Art of the Strategic Pause. 4. Directional Attention, the Conversational Flashlight. 5. Small Anecdotes, Big Influence. 6. The Mechanics in Action, a Simple Meeting. One of the most fundamental and overlooked elements of conversational control is timing. Most people think a conversation is a simple back-and-forth exchange of information, like a game of tennis where the ball is hit as soon as it arrives. But in reality, a conversation has a rhythm, a tempo, a pace. And the person who sets that pace often holds a surprising amount of power. Think about it. A fast-paced conversation creates a sense of urgency and pressure. It encourages quick, reactive answers and discourages deep thought. If they want to rush a decision or prevent someone from thinking too deeply about a weak point in their argument, they might speak a little faster, ask questions in quick succession, and keep the energy high. This forces the other person into a reactive mode, making them feel like they need to keep up. Before they know it, they've agreed to something they haven't fully processed, simply because the momentum of the conversation swept them along. The pace itself became a form of pressure. On the other hand, if they want to emphasize a point or make the other person feel the gravity of a situation, they will deliberately slow things down. They will speak more slowly, leave longer pauses after they finish a sentence, and take their time before answering a question. This slowdown forces everyone to pay closer attention. It signals that what is being discussed is important and requires careful consideration. By slowing the pace, they are subtly telling you, "This matters." Think about this. This simple act of controlling the conversational rhythm allows them to steer the emotional tone and the intellectual focus of the discussion without ever saying, "Hey, pay attention." This is why you might leave a conversation with a skilled negotiator or a calm leader, feeling like you were always one step behind. They weren't necessarily smarter or better prepared. They were simply better timekeepers. They were conducting the conversation, speeding it up to glide over details and slowing it down to amplify their key points. They were using the pace to manage your cognitive load, making it harder for you to think critically when they wanted to advance their agenda and giving you ample space to ponder the ideas they wanted you to accept. The control wasn't in their words, but in the spaces between them. Section 2. Conversational framing. Building the invisible walls. Every conversation happens within a frame, an invisible psychological boundary that shapes how you interpret the information being discussed. This frame is constructed by the words, metaphors, and assumptions used to begin a discussion. The person who sets the frame often controls the entire conversation because they define the terms of the debate before it even begins. They build the walls of the sandbox everyone else has to play in. It's one of the most subtle and powerful mechanics of influence, because most people don't even notice the frame is there. They just start talking, unaware that their perspective has already been narrowed. Let's take a simple example. Imagine you're in a meeting discussing a project that is behind schedule.
Whose fault is it?
The entire conversation that follows will be a hunt for a scapegoat, a defensive and unproductive exercise in finger-pointing.
What are the most effective steps we can take to get back on track?
And collaboration. The facts are the same, the project is late, but the frame completely changes the direction and outcome of the conversation. Skilled communicators are masters of framing. They don't argue with your points, they reframe the entire context. If you say a product is expensive, they might respond by talking about its long-term value or investment. The word expensive frames it as a cost, while investment frames it as a future gain. They haven't disputed the price, but they have completely shifted the psychological lens through which you view it. This happens constantly. A problem can be reframed as a challenge or an opportunity. A cut can be reframed as a streamlining or an efficiency adjustment. The power of framing lies in its subtlety. It doesn't feel like a direct command or a forceful argument. It feels like a simple choice of words. Yet, that choice directs your thoughts down a specific path. Once you accept the frame, you've implicitly agreed to the underlying assumptions. Arguing against the frame is much harder than arguing within it. The person who controls the frame guides your thinking without you ever realizing you're being led. They have set the agenda for your thoughts, and the rest of the conversation is often just filling in the details they want you to focus on. Section 3. The art of the strategic pause. In a world that is constantly filled with noise, silence is an anomaly, and in conversation, it's a weapon. Most people are deeply uncomfortable with silence. When a pause stretches for more than a couple of seconds, they feel an almost primal urge to fill it. They rush to speak, often saying more than they intended, revealing information they meant to hold back, agreeing to things just to break the awkward tension. The person who is comfortable with silence, who can deploy it with intention, uses this discomfort to their advantage. They understand that a strategic pause can be more powerful than any words they could utter. Think about a negotiation. You've made your offer. The other person sits back, looks at you and says nothing. They just wait. 1 second passes. 2, 3. What happens inside your head? You start to second-guess yourself. Was the offer too low? Did I offend them? Maybe I should add something else. Your own mind begins to negotiate against itself, pressured by nothing more than the absence of sound. The person who uses the pause effectively forces you to confront your own uncertainty. They create a vacuum, and your mind, desperate to fill it, often gives them exactly what they want. A strategic pause can also be used to command attention and add weight to a statement. When someone finishes an important point and then allows a moment of complete silence to follow, it acts like a non-verbal underline. That was important. Let it sink in. It prevents the conversation from immediately moving on, forcing a moment of collective reflection. By creating a deliberate void, you are making your words expand to fill the space, giving them an authority and presence they wouldn't have otherwise. It's a display of complete confidence and control. Furthermore, a pause is a powerful tool for emotional regulation. When asked a difficult or provocative question, the instinctive response is to answer immediately, often defensively. The skilled communicator resists this urge. They take a deliberate pause. First, it gives them time to formulate a thoughtful, strategic response instead of a knee-jerk reaction. Second, it communicates unflappable calm. It shows they are not rattled by the question. They are in control of their emotions, and therefore in control of the situation. The simple act of waiting 3 seconds before you answer can completely change the power dynamic of an interaction. Section 4. Directional attention. The conversational flashlight. In any conversation, there is a finite amount of attention available. The person who controls where that attention is focused effectively controls the conversation's reality. Think of attention as a flashlight in a dark room. You can only see what the beam illuminates. A skilled communicator is an expert at directing that flashlight. They can shine it on their strengths, your weaknesses, a potential future, a forgotten past. They guide the conversation not by force, but by subtly choosing what gets to be in the spotlight and what remains in the dark. Most people just follow the light without realizing who is holding the flashlight. One of the most common ways to direct attention is through the use of questions. A question is not just a request for information, it is a command for the other person's brain to go in a certain direction.
Can you walk me through your thought process? If someone asks, "Can you walk me through your thought process on that decision?" they are directing your attention inward, forcing you to justify your reasoning. Sati no, what do you see as the biggest obstacle? If they ask, "What do you see as the biggest obstacle to our success?" they are directing your attention toward problems.
Imagine we succeed beyond our wildest dreams. What does that look like? But if they ask, "Imagine we succeed beyond our wildest dreams. What does that look like?" they are directing your attention toward a positive, aspirational vision.
This isn't just about asking questions, it's also about what you choose to respond to. In a group discussion, several points might be raised at once. The person who quietly controls the flow will selectively ignore certain comments and deliberately engage with others.
That's an interesting point, Sarah. Let's explore that. By saying, "That's an interesting point, Sarah. Let's explore that a bit more," they have used their attention to validate and amplify Sarah's contribution,
while effectively dismissing everything else. They haven't said the other points are bad, they've simply starved them of the oxygen of attention. Over time, people learn which types of comments will be rewarded with attention and which will be ignored, subtly shaping the group's behavior. This mechanic is powerful because it operates under the guise of natural conversation. It doesn't feel like control. When someone directs your attention, they are simply engaging with the topic. But their choices are not random. They are shining the flashlight on the parts of the conversation that serve their goals and leaving the inconvenient parts in the shadows. They get you to focus on the details they want to discuss, the future they want to build, the problems they want to solve. They don't have to win the argument about what's important. They simply make their preferred topic the only one being lit. Section 5. Small anecdotes, big influence. Facts and data are persuasive to the logical mind. Stories and anecdotes are persuasive to the entire human psyche. A skilled communicator great salespeople rely on them. They don't say, "You should trust me." They tell a story that makes you conclude they're trustworthy.
I saw this work really well on the Johnson account.
The story acts as social proof. This is safe and effective. Masters of small narratives embed ideas so they feel like proven wisdom. They aren't just controlling the conversation, they're controlling the narrative. Section 6. The mechanics in action. A simple meeting. Let's put these hidden mechanics together to see how they operate in a common everyday scenario. A simple team meeting to decide on a new software vendor. There are 3 options on the table: A, B, and C. The meeting begins, and most people are ready to debate the features and costs of each. But Maria, a quiet project manager, wants the team to choose vendor B. She doesn't announce her preference, she doesn't dominate the discussion. Instead, she subtly employs the mechanics we've discussed to guide the outcome without anyone noticing her hand on the wheel. First, she sets the frame. Instead of letting the conversation start with, "What does everyone think?" she opens with a carefully chosen question.
Before we dive into the specific features, can we first agree on what our single most important criteria for success is? For me, it's long-term reliability and customer support.
She has just framed the entire debate. The conversation is no longer about which software is cheapest or has the most bells and whistles. It's now about reliability and support. She has built the invisible walls. Next, she controls the pace and directs attention. Tom starts talking excitedly about a flashy new feature in vendor A's software. Maria lets him finish. She pauses, a strategic pause that subtly dismisses the excitement.
That's an interesting feature. Tom, how does vendor A's support team stack up against the reliability frame we just agreed on?
She hasn't said Tom is wrong. She has simply used a question to wrench the conversational flashlight away from vendor A's strength and shine it on its known weakness, reinforcing her initial frame. Finally, as the discussion nears a decision point and some are still hesitant, Maria uses a short anecdote. This reminds me of my last project, where we chose a vendor based on price. We saved 10% up front, but we spent the next 6 months dealing with bugs and waiting days for a support ticket response. It was a nightmare that ended up costing us far more in the long run. This story isn't data, but it's powerful. It makes the abstract fear of poor support feel real and painful. By the end of the meeting, the team agrees that reliability is key and chooses vendor B. Maria barely advocated for it directly. She simply controlled the pace, the frame, the focus, guiding her team to the conclusion she had in mind from the very beginning. We began this journey with a familiar, unsettling feeling, the sense of leaving a conversation feeling guided, steered, quietly controlled. We've since dismantled that illusion. It's not magic, it's psychological mechanics. Real control isn't about force, volume, or aggression. It's a quiet art, shaping the architecture of interaction. Be the architect, not just another voice. What you say matters less than when you say it, how you say it, and what you choose not to say. They control pace, slowness, silence. They set the frame, build the psychological sandbox. They direct attention, illuminate what's useful, cast inconvenient truths into shadow. They're not winning arguments, they're making them irrelevant. They're not forcing opinions, they're creating conditions to reach their conclusions. Control rests on self-regulation. Manage emotional energy. Be a calm thermostat while others are reactive thermometers. Internal calm shows as steady posture, deliberate gaze, controlled breath. Those signals create an aura of authority. They mark who is the anchor, who is the point of stability, who is in charge. Uncovering these hidden mechanics is not an invitation to become a master manipulator. This knowledge is not a weapon to be used to exploit others or to win at all costs. Instead, its primary purpose is to foster awareness. Once you can see the invisible strings of conversational control, you are no longer a puppet. You can recognize when the pace is being rushed, when a frame is being imposed on you, when your attention is being deliberately steered. This awareness is the first and most critical step toward reclaiming your own agency. The ultimate goal is to become an ethical and effective communicator. It is about using these tools not for domination, but for clarity, connection, productive outcomes. It means using framing to turn a conversation from blame to solutions. The journey starts now. Begin to notice. Notice the pace, the frames, the flow of attention in your next conversation. Practice one small technique this week, perhaps the 3-second pause before you answer a question. Observe the change in the dynamic of the conversation and in your own sense of calm and control. As you integrate these skills, you will find that your relationships improve, your influence grows, and your opportunities expand. Because in the quiet dance of human interaction, the person who controls the conversation doesn't just control the moment, they often, ever so subtly, control the outcome.